Hey guys, how's it going? I am here again with the world's first and third jankest soldering irons because today we are going to actually put together a 48 volt Phantom to 12 volt T-Power circuit. I designed these chips and they're real simple and really easy to put together. So of course, I brought all of my soldering gear up here to my kitchen where I can put it on my stove because it's a great idea to put things containing lead near where you eat. Don't quote me on that. So, first things first is we want to get our components laid out. This is actually a really simple circuit and we won't need the wire stripper because I've already got a selection of wires pre-stripped for us, including the XLR cables that will eventually go into it. But for right now, the first thing we're going to do is get one of these Zener diodes right here out of their lovely little static-proof bag. And we are going to find the bit of the circuit that calls for, da-da-da, can you see that? Yeah, maybe. The Zener diode. And we're just going to stick that little monster in there. And the nice thing is we can kind of bend that and then get a feel for where the other leg wants to go. We'll lift it back out and just pop it in there. It's labeled so we can make sure that it is going in the right way. Positive to positive, negative to negative, all that good stuff. So once it's in there, what I'm going to do is bend the legs out so that it kind of pins it in place real good, and I can stop thinking about it until it's time to solder it on there. So we've got a couple of other ones that we want to solder on there, and I tell you, usually I start with like the ones on the back because there's a couple that I had to place on the back since this thing is so tiny, and one of them is a 180 ohm resistor and another one is a 2021 ohm resistor. So we'll get the latter right now, and we're going to need 2 of these, and I have 4 left. Imagine that, because I got 5 of these boards and this one is number 4. And so let's go ahead and put the last 2 back so we'll have them when we want them, and we'll place these on the board, shall we? Matter exactly where we place them, but it's always nice to bend it relatively the size you want so that you can get it to lay nice and neat and flat, and you don't have to go through a whole lot of shenanigans to make it work. Now there's a 180 ohm resistor on the back of this, and if you can see, the tracer on it gets the one pin of it going longitudinally, a little bit close to these pins that have all the other stuff on the other side going horizontally. So I'm going to be real careful with that one. I'm not going to pin down one side because it gives me a little latitude to position it. So let's get our 180 ohm resistors, pluck a couple of them out of here, and put them in place. The one on the back, we're going to add a little extra length to the bend on the lead of that one so that we can position it later. And I'm going to pull this end close down, but I'm going to leave this end sticking up just a little bit so that I've got room to work. And we'll pull that out to the side. And now we will put the 180 ohm resistor on the other side correctly, and we'll do the same with the other 2K21. This is always the fun part, just building out a board and making sure that everything is positioned right. See? Very cool. Whoop. And it's gone. Alright. So, what else do we need? Yeah, another 2K to 1 resistor. I will tell you, I learned my lesson about soldering these down on something so small before I put the capacitors on, because the capacitors are fairly large, and this is very small, and the holes are very close together, and you can fill up those holes with globs of solder if you're not careful. So now we just go ahead and position the capacitors before we start soldering. Speaking of the capacitors, here they are. Compared to the board, they are large boys. So, we need to somehow squeeze 3 of these onto this board. And that we will do right now. Now these are polarized capacitors. I tried this with non-polar capacitors, but non-polarized capacitors of this value are ginormous. And yeah, there is no way I am fitting 3 of those on this and getting it inside an enclosure. So, polarized it is. And luckily I have marked on the board which one is which. And if I can just remember to correctly position. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Always pays to double check. I got this one in the wrong hole. There we are. Much better. I had wondered why that wasn't working. So, actually what we are going to do is to solder down these that are going to live under the capacitors real quick. Just because we can nip them off and get them out of our way. So, yeah, let's deal with this, one 2K resistor real fast, and then we'll start putting the capacitors on the board. Now, I have 2 options. New janky soldering iron, old janky soldering iron. But the old janky soldering iron has a spade tip and one that is not disintegrating. So we're gonna try that first and see what we see. In the meantime, I think I'm gonna try to get these leads into the board, and in order to do that, they have a few more strands than we want, so I'm just gonna trim a few off. It'll be fine. Okay, so these are the yellow ones, which means those are for XLR, and those will be XLR 2 and 3. There we go. There is 2. We'll stick that in there. And XLR 3. You guys haven't figured it out by now. I am very nearsighted and have to hold this thing close to my face to figure out what I'm looking at. Which is going to be a lot more fun and concerning when I start soldering here in a minute. You have been warned. I can feel that soldering iron heating up, so I'd better hurry up and get our wire trimmed and set here. And get that twisted. XLR1, please and thank you. Go in. Oh, you're gonna be uncooperative, aren't you? Yeah, you're gonna spool out one little wire. And I'm gonna have to trim that off because I don't want sharp spikes. The reason you don't want sharp spikes on anything to do with audio is because charges can run away from it. And if charges run away from that, that means hiss. There we go. Yeah, we don't want no hiss, no fuzz, no nothing. So, right now, we have several things that can be soldered into place. So we're going to do that. Preferably without setting fire to our hair. Ah. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to disappoint you with my soldering skills because I am terrible. No, I'm serious. I am bad at this. And, I am just warning you ahead of time because, like, I want you under no illusions that I am good at what I am doing. Get this end of the 2K resistor. Come on, you little shit. Probably good enough. Yeah, that's coming through. Good. Okay, so those are all pinned into place real nicely. So I can actually trim off the excess for those. So, boom, boom. Oh, yeah, I can't trim that one yet because I didn't cut it yet. But we will cut the little excess wire off of the XLR leads as our molten hot soldering iron tries to escape. Okay, nip. Yeah, and the important bit is these on the far side. I can nip these from here, and they won't be in the way when we try to solder stuff to the other side. Boom. And boom. Okay, so see, that's nice and neat now. The ones that are still sticking out are ones that I haven't soldered yet because there's ones in between there. Those are for the capacitors, and I don't want to try to solder those with those so close because it might glom into the holes and seal them shut. So we have the ones that stick through this way, by and large, taken care of and trimmed off. So what we're going to do now is put in the capacitors and finish our soldering job. Well, after we put the soldering iron back up here so that it doesn't, like, run away and set fire to me or my clothing or my house. Ah! So now all we have to do is follow the indications. Negative goes here, positive goes here. And just push that on through. And I'm going to kind of settle these back and forth, one to one side, one to the other, so that they kind of mesh with one another and don't kind of stack up, because when we go to put them in an enclosure, that'll kind of let them nest a little nicer. Okay, negative goes to that side on this one. And we'll be sure that that resistor avoids that. Yes, please and thank you. Yeah, we'll kind of nestle this one to this side and leave the longer part of the lead on that side. And then we'll do the third one just the opposite again. Also, let's bend these leads down a little bit so that we can pin these in place a little better and they hold together a little more. And they don't wobble around so much while I'm trying to put in number 3. Yep. And that'll be the positive on that side and the negative on that side. And again, we'll push this over to this side as we seat it. There we go, see? And we bend the lead pins. We bend the lead pins. And now we can deal with the pin on this resistor finally. Work that in just a little bit. On future versions of this board, I'm going to take this pad for this pin, this little hole, and I'm going to move it in a little bit so that it's not curved like that. But I think it's fine for right now. It's not hurting anything. I don't know what I dropped, but I'll figure it out later. Okay. So now we just need to solder all this stuff into place. And I would like to remind everyone again how terrible I am at this. So please, if you are looking for a soldering tutorial or instructional video, do not use this as one, because I guarantee you, you will be disappointed, and you have been warned. Let's trim that off so that I can get to the other ones. On these boards, I like to, on the side that there's the legs where you're soldering, I like to check and make sure that the solder has flowed all the way through the hole to the far side of the pin and filled it up so that it's a really good connection, because the holes actually are lined on the inside. They're little metal barrels. And as long as the solder completely fills it up, you're pretty sure you've got a nice, good flow and a decent connection. But again, remember, I'm terrible at soldering. So do not come here for soldering technique advice. Best I can do is advice on what you should see when you finish. Come on, you little shit. Okay. Get these out of the way, and then we'll get that last one. Oh. Last two, actually. I still need to solder our weird little resistor there. Ah, shit. Let me make sure I didn't accidentally connect those. No, we're good. Somehow. Okay, final resistor, and then we need to put the leads on for the T-power side. You know what? Get in there, you little monster. Have we got everyone? Yeah, let's trim that one off. A little smaller, make sure that flowed through. Yeah, close enough. Trim that, and it is beautiful. It is done. Looky there. Wahahaha. Okay, so that's how you put this together. Except this one leg is stuck to the side. There we go. That's how you put this together. And as you can see, everything is nice, neat, compact, and in place. As much as it's going to be right now. And all we have to do now is to put the leads on for the microphones. So, here we go. These aren't... One of these isn't stripped yet, but that's okay. So let's trim the excess off. Spin this up. This is going to be our ground wire. And it's important we have two different colors for this side because T-power mics are not the same voltage on both sides like a XLR mic is. Shocking, I know. A different mic standard is different. Also, I'm going to put these through the top so it's easier to solder them. There we go. Come on. Cooperate with me, please. There we go, there's one. I don't really need such a big long ground lead on this, but like the short one should always be the ground lead because there's plenty of room to get one ground to the other, but as we say in the business, oh well, it'll be fine. There we go. Now, we need to strip this one because I'm an idiot and didn't do it before the recording. And so there we go. Last one. And in a bit, we'll run down and check on the 3D printer and see if the enclosure for this has finished, and we will put it together. Oh, come on. The problem with using stranded wire through a printed circuit board is that you kind of have to spin it and make sure it all goes through the hole, because if you get strands that are left out, they bunch up and it's not pretty, and you also have little jaggedy sharp edges of wire that like audio signals can run away from and be all horrible. There we go. By the way, I am using lead-free solder, but I'm pretty sure you still should not be breathing it. And we're going to trim the leads off. There we go. It's a thing of beauty. Ha 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 ha. This, ladies and gentlemen, will let you plug a T-Power microphone into your 48-volt Phantom power source, including just any modern interface. So let's unplug our soldering iron, because we don't quite need it much anymore, although we are going to need it in a minute to connect this to the XLR cables. But before we do that, I need to go check on the enclosure and make sure that the enclosure has finished printing. So one sec, I will be right back. Okay, hey everybody. You can tell it's later in the day because I'm wearing a different shirt and I no longer have a beard. That makes sense, right? Okay, so let's do this. We have our circuit completed. As we said earlier, I took the liberty of putting some heat shrink tubing on this so that we can kind of pretty it up, although we'll probably coat it with hot glue as well, just to kind of seal it real good. We have got to actually solder this to our XLR plugs. We need to make sure we put the correct XLR plug onto the correct side. The female needs to go onto the microphone side for the T-Power microphone. The male needs to go on the side for the interface. And we have got our little enclosure for it. So I put one side on already. The other side we will fit on after we get everything stuffed inside. So first things first, that side is the XLR side, which means it plugs into the thing, which means it goes to the male plug. So we will feed this on through and give ourselves a little extra room to work here. We'll pull it out at the end, and I should probably start heating up our soldering iron, because if I don't, it will not be hot and I will not be able to melt any solder with it. So there we go. Amazingly enough, I do know what I'm doing, and I haven't poisoned myself with lead yet. So, while we wait for this to warm up, which could take a second, we're going to go ahead and spin all these together. So, here is our ground. There we go. Very important to make sure we get XLR2 and XLR3 right. I mean, it's not as important on this side. All that'll happen if we don't is that it will be reversed phase if we get XLR2 and XLR3 swapped, which isn't the end of the world. Like, a lot of mics are reversed phased. Soviet mics tended to be reverse phase. Ribbons are reverse phase if you talk at them from the back. So reverse phase isn't really a big deal per se, but if we being correct. We don't need to surprise customers with a reverse phase adapter. It's nice when everything works as expected. So yeah, we have these twisted together. We'll solder them, and then I will try to get the shrink tubing over them. I don't know if we'll succeed or not, but that's okay, because if we don't, we will use hot glue in lieu of it. It'll work great, I promise. Now, are we warm enough on our soldering iron? Yes, let's hover our bare hand over the soldering iron to see if it's warm. That's always a good idea, right? Or we can just touch solder to it. Oh, yeah, I should probably have the fan on.
So good news and bad news. Good news is, well, the bad news is turning on the fan stopped the recording. The good news is it spared you guys from having to watch my terrible soldering job. For the first half.
The second half, you are doomed to witness this travesty. So let's start with our ground. Mwahaha. There we go. Stay. Okay. TP3 is our red one. So let's twist those together. We can also slip this heat shrink tubing on here and just melt that down a little bit and grip it on there for some extra stability. Although I'm just gonna cover most of it with hot glue. It'll be fine. Here's number 2. And the final solder for the whole project. Be sure we get those twisted and intermeshed really good, so that when we solder it, they get good contact with each other. There we go. Slide our heat shrink tubing over it and warm it up a little bit. There we go. Now we can unplug the soldering iron and plug in our magic ambidextrous hot glue gun. If I can find the cord for it. Which one is that? Yeah, that appears to be it. Alright, while we wait for the hot glue gun to warm up, we will detangle the soldering iron from it for sanity's sake and safety's sake. I say for safety's sake, but like, I don't think OSHA likes anything about what we're doing right here. I'm doing this for the sake of the video. Normally, most of this is done down in the workshop, where like you guys just really don't want to go.
You may have guessed, but I don't necessarily trust people as far as I can kick them with electronics. So,
Before we put them into the box, we are going to add a little insurance in the form of sealing all of our connectors on this thing with some hot glue so that they don't brush against anything else, including each other, if someone is a little too rough with our box, especially me putting the box together. Also, I like to shoot it under the capacitors because they can flex and bend, and on a board that is put together this tightly, they can lean over and touch stuff they're not supposed to if we're kind of jerking and pulling on it. It seals it up all nice and makes it so nothing can touch it that shouldn't. Not a bad idea. So there we go. While that dries, we're going to go around and put a little dollop around all of our junctions here too, because I used heat shrink tubing that was too small, and so we're replacing heat shrink tubing with hot melt adhesive, which is probably better for holding it in place, come to think of it, as long as we make sure to get it coated all the way around. And we will, because I'm thorough, and I've done this a lot. Plus, if we get this little trio here in sort of a clover leaf configuration and get it covered with a good little knot here, it'll keep us from being able to yank it out the box. We'll secure it with a little more, but for now, we just kind of want to give it a little hitching point, a stress relief point, so that when we pull it back through, we're not yanking on any soldered junctions and weakening them. Now, even though these are covered with heat shrink tubing, I am going to put a little dot near the ends just for safety, and again as a stress relief point. Okay. Now that we have our stress relief points, what we're going to do is carefully slide this back into our case. That one on that side, and we'll check this one on this side. And now that they're in there, next to the ends, we're just going to shoot a little hot melt adhesive there to make little plugs, and that will hold the wires in and keep them from coming out. It'll set up, it'll make little collars, and it means that our put that off the side a little bit so that our lid goes on. It means that our plugs can't be yanked out when it sets up. And then all we have to do is shove the rest of this into the box and we are in business. But that's going to take a minute to set up, so I'll be right back. Okay, now it's time to gently place the circuitry inside the box. So we gently gather it up and position it where it will be happiest, taking care to place the wires around it.
There we go. Happy as a little clam. Now, let's gently tuck the wires into place. Perfect fit. Cool, huh? So, now all we have to do is to make sure that the lid fits. And sometimes with 3D printed enclosures like this, you do have to play with them a little bit to make sure that they, yeah, here we go. To make sure that they fit on exactly right. Because sometimes you might need to file or sand a little bit. This one's a little tight, but it seems to want to go on all right, I think. Actually, I might need to sand down the inner edge a little bit, so I will be right back. There we go. I'll adjust that in future prints so that it doesn't require any modification. But for now, yeah, that seems like it fits on pretty good. So, let's do this. We're going to chase around the inside of this with a little bit of hot glue. And then we'll just go ahead and stick the cap on and hold it in place with our thumbs until it sets. And we will have a sealed unit. This might take a minute, but it's worth it. So, I bet your big question is, does it work? Well, you tell me. I'm talking to you on it right now, which I probably shouldn't be because a shotgun mic this close while being held in my hand probably doesn't sound that great, but it's being powered by the box we just built. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.